I'm excited to announce Kyle Fischel and I will be running our 1-3 meetup game on Saturday, April 22nd at 12 p.m. at Orange City Racing and Card Club. This is a 1-3 no limit with a $10 bomb pot every dealer change, $500 max buy-in. These games get pretty crazy. You can go check out episode 50 or episode 53 or episode 63 to see just how much action there are at these games. Come on out on the 22nd and try to make the vlog. Hey, what is going on? Welcome back to the vlog. It is a Saturday morning, and I'm up here pretty early. I want to get a Saturday afternoon session in. It's the last day of spring break. I'll go back to work next week. So I want to go in, make some content, make some money, enjoy this final weekend being off. If you enjoy, like and subscribe. Let's get to it. I just want to take a moment and say that the 2-year anniversary of this channel is coming up in June. It would be really cool to hit 2,000 subscribers before we hit that mark. It would mean a lot to me. These vlogs take a lot of work, about 40 minutes for every minute of footage that you see. So it would be really great if you could hit the thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, please take a moment to do so. Leave a comment as well. You hear all the vloggers talk about that, but it really does help push the video out to more people. In the first hand of the night, we're in the big blind, and we look down at Jack 5 offsuit. We see calls from the hijack and the small blind. I check. We're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is 4-6-7 rainbow, so I flopped it open-ended straight draw. The small blind leads out, but only for $8. I'm open-ended, so I'm not going anywhere. I call. The hijack folds, however, so we're heads up to a turn. The turn is a queen of diamonds, and the small blind bets again, but this time only for $7. I don't think he has too strong of a hand, maybe a weak pair or a straight draw of his own. Perhaps I can push him off his hand, and so I bump it up to $25. Back on the small blind, it only takes him about 5 seconds to call, so now I'm not sure where I'm going to go with this hand. The river is a 6 of diamonds, so it brings in the flush and it pairs the board. This might actually be a great card for me to bluff on. The small blind checks this time. I still think he's relegated to either one pair hands or missed draws, and I doubt he loves a board pairing flush card, so I'm going to fire and I bet $45. Probably a bit on the small side. My opponent doesn't look very comfortable, and he eventually folds, so we win this first one, and it's good to establish ourselves in the reads that we have. We're in +1 and we look down at pocket 4s. We see a limp from under the gun before I bumped up to $10. I would rather take the lead now and raise as opposed to calling and getting raised later on down the road. We see a call from +2 and the small blind, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is 9-4-10 rainbow, so we flop bottom set. It checks all the way to +2, who fires for $10. We then see a call from the small blind, and I don't want to scare anyone off, so I just call. We're still 3 ways to the turn. The turn is a deuce of clubs. It brings in a flush draw. The small blind takes the lead on this card and bets $15. With 2 clubs, I think I have to raise for a little bit of protection, so I do. I bump it up to $50. On +2, who's giving it some thought, but they eventually fold. The small blind calls, however, so we're off to the river heads up. The river is a jack of diamonds. It's not my favorite card as some straight draws get there. My opponent checks, and he has his eyes locked on me, but I don't hesitate and I jam all in. He asks for a count, and I have him covered. He says he calls, so I just roll it over immediately, and he says he can't beat a set, and we win again. The very next hand, we're under the gun, and we look down at King Jack offsuit. I open things up for $10. We see a late position player call before the small blind min raises to $20. That's not going to get many folds. We both call. We're off to the flop 3 ways. The flop is 7-8 jack with 2 diamonds, so we have top pair on a really connected board. The small blind then down bets to $10. With top pair and so many draws available, I think my hand needs a little bit of protection, so I bump it up to $40. The late position player folds and it's back on the small blind, and he eventually makes the call, so we're heads up to the turn. The turn is a 4 club, so it brings in a second flush draw. My opponent slows down and checks, and so I want to apply max pressure, and so I jam all in for about $110 effective. I'm okay if he folds here. He's not folding, however, and he calls. The river is a 2 of diamonds, so it does bring in the front door flush. I roll it over, and he says my pair beats his, and he shows pocket 6s, so he pays us off 2 hands in a row. We're straddling from the button, and we look down at ace-4 offsuit. We see 3 calls before the action gets to me, and I check. We're off to a flop in position 4 ways. The flop is king-queen deuce with 2 diamonds. It checks to the hijack who fires for $10. It folds to me, and I can't fold to one bet from a guy playing any 2 cards, so I call. We see one other caller, so we're 3 ways to the turn. The turn is a 7 of diamonds, so now I have the nut flush draw. It checks to the hijack who bets again, and he bets for $10 again. Now picking up this flush draw, I'm definitely not going anywhere, so I call again. An early position player also calls, so we're 3 ways to the river. The river is a 4 of diamonds, so I've made the nuts here. It checks to the hijack again, and he bets $25 this time. This is beautiful. This guy hasn't folded all day. I once again put in a raise, and I bump it up to $75, and there's a little speech play here.
You and I just can't seem to stop tangling, can we?
I'm tangling with everybody.
What'd you do, river and flush?
No.
Oh, I might be in decent shape then.
The problem is I flopped 2 pairs. And then it just went diamond death.
King deuce. Did you really call with king deuce? King deuce. God almighty.
I think you do have a diamond though, but I'm gonna call since I don't even have 75. Yeah, I don't even have 75. And it was queen deuce.
Kind of a lesson for this guy about bet sizes. He's got to size up there on the turn. A bet of something closer to pot and it makes it a lot harder for me to continue, but $10 to win 50, I'm never folding a draw to 5-1 odds. That's 3 hands in a row getting this guy to pay me off. We're in the big blind and we look down at ace-5 offsuit. There are 4 callers when the action gets to me, and so I'm going to put in a raise, but I only raised to $20. I think that's a mistake. I probably need to go a little closer to 30. It folds back to the hijack who calls. Everybody else folds, so we're heads up to a flop. The flop is 3-5 queen rainbow, so I flop middle pair. I put out a c-bet of $45, and my opponent pretty quickly calls, so we're off to the turn. The turn is another queen. It's the queen of spades. I slow down here and I check, and I'm happy to see my opponent immediately check back. The river is a 6 of diamonds, and it doesn't help me. As I'm thinking, my opponent grabs a stack of her chips, as if she's prepared to call any bet I make, so it actually slows me down and I check. She checks right behind and shows ace-3, and we win this one. Maybe a little passive there at the end, but she said she wasn't putting any more money in there anyways. But it's good to know she'll call off almost a third of her stack on the flop with bottom pair. We're straddling from the button when we look down at king-queen offsuit. We see 5 callers this time before the action gets to us, and it feels like a great squeeze spot, so I bump it up to $30. It folds back to the low jack, who then jams for $95 total. The old limp re-raise. It's only $65 more. I have to call. The flop is all low cards. Not great. The turn's a 9 of diamonds, the river a 9 of spades, and my opponent's just kind of staring at me. I tell him I missed, and he's kind of slow and rolling over pocket 9s for quads. Not sure why he expected me to show first since I called him. Feels kind of like a slow roll. He did say if his high hand holds up, he was going to buy a round for the table, and it did, so at least I'm getting a white claw out of it. We're in the big blind, and we look down at 6-9 offsuit. There are 3 callers before it gets to me, and I check. We're off to a flop 4 ways. The flop is 8-9-10 rainbow, so we flop middle pair and a gut shot straight draw. We see the small blind lead for $6. My hand isn't great, but it has a lot of potential, so I end up making the call here. The button calls as well, so we're 3 ways to the turn. We immediately get there with the 7 of clubs on the turn. We make the bottom end of it. The small blind checks, and so I take the betting lead on this card, and I fire for $15. We see the button call and the small blind fold, so we're heads up to the river. The river's not great. It's a 7 of spades, so when the action's on me, I'm going to put a blocker bet out, and I fire for $20. The button decides $20 isn't enough, though, and he fires for $70. I have the bottom end of it, and this opponent did say he loves playing Jack 10, but he would also do this exact same thing with a 2-pair hand or even an overpair. He can't always have a jack here, so I call.
All right, I call. Show me a jack.
I did not expect that, and I won't lie, it has me a little tilted. I've got to step away for a minute and get my focus back. We're in the cutoff, and we look down at ace-jack of clubs. We see 3 callers before the action gets to me, and I bump it up to $17. We see both blinds call, so we're 3 ways to a flop. The flop is king 10 queen rainbow, so we flop Broadway here. It checks to me, and I put a little pot sweetener bet of $15 out, and we see both players call, so we're still 3 ways to the turn.
The turn is a 5 of spades, so it does put a flush draw on the board. The small blind checks, and then the big blind leads out for $50. This is great. He's got about $200 or so behind, and I want to get it, but I don't want to be the one to force it. There are plenty of hands that can call a raise, like 2-pair hands, sets, or pair plus draw type hands, so I bump it up to $150. The small blind folds, and the big blind wastes no time jamming all in, and of course I snap it off. The river's a 9 of hearts, and my opponent shows pocket 10s for a flopped bottom set. Kind of gross, but happy to be taking this one down.
What did he have? Set of 10s. Set of 10s. There's still one more card when they did all that.
The very next hand, we look down at pocket 7s. I'm still stacking chips, and they're kind of blocking the camera, so I'm not entirely sure of the action here, but I do know we're 3 ways to a flop with $30 in the middle. The flop is King 7-3 Rainbow, so now we flop middle set. It checks to me, and I fire for $15. It folds to an early position player who calls. When the action's back on the cutoff, he puts in the check raise to $60. Back on me, and I'm not going to get tricky here. The cutoff appears to have about $180 behind, and so I jam all in. Early position gets out of the way, and it's back on the cutoff, who says it must be time to go home, and he calls. And when he calls, it's actually for $320. He had some chips behind a cup holder I didn't see, so we've got a pretty good sized pot heading here to a run out. The turn is a 9 of spades, and the river an ace of diamonds. I announce my set, and he doesn't appear to be very happy, and he flips over King 3 for a flop 2 pair. Another good sized pot coming our way. A couple hands later, we're in the big blind, and we look down at ace-king offsuit. We see calls from under the gun, +1 and +2. The cutoff is in a dead blind, and he checks. The action on me, and I bump it up to $15. 3 of the 4 players call, so we're going 4 ways to a flop. The flop is ace-3-5 Rainbow, so we have top pair, top kicker here. The small blind leads into us, and it's only for $15. The action on me, and I'm going to put in a raise. There are plenty of weaker aces or even under pairs that can call a small raise, so I bump it up to $55. It folds back to the small blind, who then re-raises to $100. Almost a min click. I didn't expect that, and it's most likely a 2-pair hand, but I feel like my hand is just way too strong to fold, so I'm going to call looking to evaluate the turn. The turn is a king of diamonds. Well, that probably helps. The small blind then slows down and checks. Perhaps it's a trap. He has about $400 left. There's over $250 in the pot. If he has a set, so be it. I jam. He calls and flips over ace-3 for a worse 2 pair. We have a 1K pot heading to the river. And the river is a 2 of clubs, and we get a little lucky there on the turn, and we win another big pot. So all that action took place in about 10 minutes, and we went from having about $375 in our stack to over $1,500. After this, we go pretty card dead for about 40 minutes, a lot of raising and missing flops, before finally we're in the cutoff and we look down at 8-9 of diamonds. It folds to the hijack, who bumps it up to $12. I'm happy to call here with suited connectors. We see the big blind call as well, so we're 3 ways to the flop. The flop is 10 Jack Queen Rainbow, so we flop the bottom end of it here. It checks to the hijack, who then shoves for his last $73. It's on me, and perhaps if I flat, I can get the big blind to commit her stack as well, so I just call here. The big blind folds, however, so we're heads up to a run out. The turn is a 6 of spades, and the river is a queen of spades. Kind of a bad card, both bringing in the flush and pairing the board. I show my hand, and the hijack flips over pocket aces. Kind of gross, but just kind of how it's going for me today. In the final hand of the night, we're in the hijack, and we look down at Queen Jack of Hearts. We see under the gun call before it folds all the way to me, and I bump it up to $10. Both the big blind and under the gun call, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is Queen 10-5 with 2 clubs, so we have top pair. It checks to me, and I put a c-bet out of $20. Both players call, so we're still 3 ways to a turn. The turn's the 8 of spades. It brings some weird straight draws in. It checks to me again, and this time I fire for $75. I'm trying to get value from a hand like Jack X or 9X or maybe a club draw who feels they can call one more street. The big blind snap calls. That's interesting. Under the gun lets it go. We're heads up to the river. The river is a weird card. It's the Jack of spades, so it gives me 2 pair, but it puts a 4-liner out. Any 9 makes a straight. My opponent checks, and I just quickly check behind to get to showdown. I announce my hand, and she mucks. She said she was on a club draw, so I probably got the max there. We get to win one more. As 3 p.m. approached, I felt pretty lucky. I got to play cards 3 times this week, and I booked 2 really healthy wins, so I decided it was time to rack up and head home.
So I came in with a goal, and the goal was to create content. However the session went, I needed the content to put out. And everything just seemed to fall into place. Now I won't lie, about 2.5 hours in, when I flipped over that bottom end of the straight, and my opponent had gone runner, full house, I got pretty tilted. And my stack had gone from like over 600 down to about 375, and I was feeling the tilt sinking in. I was actually thinking about getting ready to go. And it actually got close to the time I was gonna leave. Then just those 3 hands in that 10-minute period was just wild. And then of course, you know, after that, I just kind of went a little dead or whatever, but still had a good time and got to make some content. So in today for $200, 1 buy-in, out for $1,637. Not a bad day. If you enjoy, like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more poker content. And you can follow me on Instagram at 7cardflushpoker.